Joining us on the line today is, of course, a WWE Hall of Famer. He's a G.I. Joe come to life and a no-doubt pop culture icon. He's a former WWE heavyweight champion. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand at attention for the legendary Sergeant Slaughter. Thank you so much for joining the two-man power trip of wrestling.
Okay, that's all right. At ease. Thank you for the great introduction.
It's such a great cross of two different generational platforms, WWE and G.I. Joe, just so synonymous with, like I said, pop culture, the 1980s, and literally this generation just is all about Sergeant Slaughter. But as funny as it is, Woodbridge, Virginia is not too far from an area you're very familiar with, and that's the Mid-Atlantic Wrestling Territory. And at one point, Mid-Atlantic featured one of the most impressive collection of stars ever assembled in one place, like with Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Roddy Piper, Blackjack Mulligan, your partner Don Kernodle, Wahoo McDaniel, so many others. But what are some of your favorite Mid-Atlantic memories?
Well, there were so many of them. As you mentioned, Ricky Steamboat, Jay Youngblood, and my partner at the time, Don Kernodle. We probably had some of the greatest matches ever witnessed in tag team action. And the match we had in Greensboro, North Carolina, in a cage match for the title, they still claim that wasn't the greatest matches of all time because they never had tag matches in a cage before. And plus, there was so much on the line. If Steamboat and Youngblood lost, they could never wrestle again as a team. And, of course, if we lost the titles. And back then, we didn't have pay-per-views. We had closed circuit and kept trying to get Crockett Promotions to rent the building next door to do closed circuit, but they were, buying tickets in advance weren't a big deal either. So, ended up... The police report, I still have a little clipping in my office that said that 16 to 20,000 people were turned away on that day. And that's a lot of fans wanting to see a match. And so it meant a lot, and it's still very close to Don and I. I see Steve-O once in a while, and he always mentions that match.
Yeah, totally. We talked to him not too long ago, and that was one of the matches that he did bring up. And it's funny that, that Mid-Atlantic Wrestling Territory, in the grand scheme of things, it seems like it was so long ago that it was up and running, but, it still has such a lasting effect in the area. The fans are still rabid for Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. But how about the fans of the Mid-Atlantic area? Did they differ at all from any of the fans in other territories that you were at that point of your career?
No, all the fans are pretty much the same wherever you go. As long as you entertain them, tell them a good story, they're going to get behind you whether you're the hero or the villain. It's just the way you come across your character. It's just, really nice to see that the fans are getting back into that, wanting to be told the story, and it makes it so much easier, and it's so much fun for the villains and the heroes to tell those stories and have people that really want to watch those stories and continue to watch them.
Now, we were talking about great matches. Obviously, you and Kernodle against Steamboat and Youngblood, definitely a good one. But one that really sticks out to me that you can actually watch on the WWE Network is from MSG. And it was a great feud you had with the legendary Pat Patterson, and it was an alley fight, and it was today's what I guess you'd call hardcore style. But what were your memories of that match, or what are your memories of feuding with Pat Patterson in MSG?
Well, as you said, it was hardcore before hardcore, and we really didn't know what we were getting into. I just talked to Pat Patterson about it at SummerSlam, and it was one of those matches that he said was the greatest of his career. And the whole magic about the match was that there was no referee. And if you go in and try to have a match without a referee, it's pretty difficult, especially to hold the fans and keep them, on their feet and interested in the match. And it just, from the time we were allowed to wear whatever we wanted to wear in the ring. There were no rules, of course, no referee. How did you, stop a match like that? And nobody really had any idea. And so we just went out there and battled and battled and battled. From the time I stepped onto the apron, we started fighting. And, blood, the sweat, and the beer, as they say, I was battling for everything I had, and climbing back in the ring when all of a sudden I saw this towel go flying into the ring, and I was just so upset because I wasn't done. I wanted to continue, and finally they sent officials out there and stopped the match, and I really didn't lose. It really propelled Sergeant Slaughter to be the badass guy that he is today, that he never quit, even though he was, bleeding half to death, and wouldn't stop the battle, and it really propelled me into the next step of going against the Iron Sheik and fighting for America, and everything that continued and went on from there.
I definitely want to get into, the patriotic side of you, but you mentioned that you and Pat Patterson were at SummerSlam, and speaking of that weekend, obviously it was a huge weekend with NXT TakeOver being in Brooklyn, and lo and behold, your first row, and, they get a great shot of you and Ric Flair on camera. What was it like at NXT? Did you enjoy your time? Did you enjoy the show?
It was pretty incredible. I was kind of set back myself a little bit because there was so much energy in the audience, in the crowd, and the performers. A lot of them I didn't really know as well as I do the WWE, superstars. And I've gotten to know more of the divas because there isn't as many of them. But, getting out there and seeing, there wasn't many of the WWE superstars there. Some were, wandering around, but it was like NXT's own little private show to the public, and I was just incredibly entertained. And to be asked to go out at ringside and watch one of the matches, and it was just a great honor to be part of that first inaugural, Brooklyn, New York type style match, and just brought me back to when I first, went into the ring in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and Madison Square Gardens, and Baltimore, and Maryland, Philadelphia, and just the fans' appreciation of they know how hard you work in there, and they really enjoy being entertained. And when you give them something that they really enjoy, they just make you go harder and harder, and you just put out more than you really thought you could.
No doubt, and it was great seeing you there. And obviously, you're in your patriotic, the awesome hat, that you're known for, and the great, military jacket. But where did you spawn the great idea of being, that super patriot, where you're saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and you're leading the crowd, and that the awesome hat that everyone knows you for, and the military garb? Where'd you get, all your influences from, and all your ideas for that?
It just comes natural, being a patriotic person, and we just, my uncle served in the Korean War, and I had other uncles that served in the military, but my one uncle that was in Korean War, he stepped on a landmine and lost his leg and his one of his eyes, and some of his personal possessions, I should say, but he still fathered 5 children, and so I always admired him. He was my hero, followed my father, and I just thought, at the time there wasn't anybody really, there was a few doing the G.I. Joe type of thing, but it just came kind of natural. And the camouflage is symbolic of power, and just I camouflaged a limousine one time because our cars were just being destroyed by fans, and I wanted to get something really solid and tough, and found this 1973 Cadillac and pristine shape, and took it to a Army National Guard, and they painted it for me, and it just became a character in itself. And it just grew, kept growing and growing and growing, and we kept watering it and seeing how far it would grow, and the results are still there today.
Now, obviously, you were a huge, huge character in the G.I. Joe series, probably the greatest G.I. Joe character of all time, if I could say that. And I distinctly remember having all the toys and all the Florida toys. I mean, just awesome line of toys. Obviously, you're in the G.I. Joe movie and everything else, but how did you go about being brought into G.I. Joe? How did they approach you, and what was Vince's reaction to that?
Well, I was approached by a friend of mine who ended up being my attorney, and he had a friend that had a business in Providence, Rhode Island, and G.I. Joe headquarters are in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And they started talking about, G.I. Joe and Sergeant Slaughter. And somebody came up with the idea of taking the Sergeant Slaughter and putting them into the G.I. Joe action figure. It was always animated to that point. And so they came to me and asked me what I thought about it, and I said I thought it was a great idea. So I went to approach Vince McMahon, and he thought it was a great idea too, but he said I can't let you do it because I have another toy company other than Hasbro, and there'd be a conflict of interest, and we can't do it. I'd have lawsuits and things like that. So I was a little disappointed, but kept kind of pursuing it with Vince, and finally he just said, well, if you want to go be a G.I. Joe, go ahead to WWE. So I had to make a major decision whether I wanted to become the first living G.I. Joe in its history or stay with the WWE. And I just kind of figured I could always be a professional wrestler. I could always go back to being a WWE superstar. I could never maybe get the opportunity to do the G.I. Joe. So begrudgingly, I went away from the WWE. I was on top, doing very well. Gave up a lot of things and just went on my way. And it just had, I can't look back and say I should have did it differently. I did what I did, and it's there today. Just wish it could have been promoted more with WWE than it has been over the years. But it's one of those things. We were real close to when Mattel and Hasbro were bidding for the contract for WWE. Of Hasbro getting the contract, that would have been really, really good for everybody, including myself. But I just decided to go in the G.I. Joe direction, and happy I made the move.
And looking back at that time, you not only did you left the WWF and you went on to all the G.I. Joe stuff, but you were doing so much after that WWF run where, you were at monster truck rallies, you recorded an album, and you joined the AWA and was reunited with Vern Gagne. And unfortunately, Vern Gagne has passed away this year. But how was it getting back to Vern at that point when the AWA was kind of in its last, last boom and last leg before they folded a few years later?
Yeah, it was something I approached Vern with, and he said, "Yeah, you can come and promote your G.I. Joe. That would be great." So he was one of the only wrestling organizations left out there that had any power left and any gas left in the engine. So I went there and lifted it up, and Larry Zbyszko and I ended up at the end for the title. I defeated him in Chicago, and soon after that, they disbanded. They just couldn't keep up with the times with Vince, I know that Vince approached not only Vern but all the regional promoters and asked them to join him. And he told them what he had in mind, with pay-per-view and cable and all the different things that he had in mind. And they all kind of laughed at him and didn't like, his ideas. And so they ended up all kind of going under the table, and Vince continued. And I didn't have any bad blood. If we did have bad blood, Vince and I, we buried the hatchet. Still working as their ambassador today.
Your run as the anti-American hero, anti-American bad guy, when you won the WWE Championship was phenomenal. But before that, I just want to mention really quickly about G.I. Joe with the movie being now almost 25 years old. And did you think the movie was going to have such a lasting impact when you joined up with them?
Well, you never think much about that when you're first doing it, even the action figure. It was... as I said, there was a conflict of interest, and WWE had just, come out with their first action figures, and I was manufactured, but I wasn't able to be sold under the WWE, branch. And so Hasbro made a Sergeant Slaughter action figure that was just a little bit bigger than the WWE's. It's just little things that went on, and all of a sudden we went to the G.I. Joe action figure, and it was so much smaller, but it was easier for children, of course, and to play with and collect, and it's just amazing to see it. I think over the years I've got all different sizes, of course. Probably about 30 or 40 action figures of Sergeant Slaughter, not only in G.I. Joe, but WWE and different vehicles. And it's just amazing what goes on out there, and what people are wanting to be involved with. And, of course, the movie kind of speaks for itself. We didn't actually think that it was going to be that big, but it was huge. The first Sergeant Slaughter action figure with G.I. Joe was phenomenal. They expected to sell maybe 300,000 of them, and they ended up 4 or 5 million. And they had to back order everything because they weren't expecting to happen. And back then you couldn't buy Sergeant Slaughter; you had to earn them. And it was just all types of publicity and different promotions, and we just you didn't have time to stop and think about all those things that were going on. You just went out and did them. It's like wrestling. I remember wrestling 12 times a week one time. 12 matches in 1 week.
Wow.
It's hard to explain how you do those things, but you do it.
Now, obviously, we were talking about you being an anti-American, and you returned to the WWF, 1990, 1991-ish. Was it hard to play the anti-American? Did you have some reservations about doing it at first? I mean, obviously, it led to you winning the title and a big feud with Hogan, but did you, basically, did you want to do it, or was it something that was hard to come about?
Well, it was something that, I'm in the business of entertaining, and of course, as I said earlier, I couldn't do the first 6 WrestleManias because I was with Hasbro and G.I. Joe. And I kind of was set back that I wasn't with the WWE. It kind of hurt feelings, and I didn't really watch much of the shows. And I really didn't have much time anyway, but I did watch WrestleMania 6 from Toronto. Hogan and Warrior were the top bill, were the main event, and I watched it. And the next day I sent Vince McMahon a handwritten note to his home saying that I had watched the pay-per-view, and it wasn't so much the match that I thought was was so good, but his production, I thought his production could not be topped by anybody that I'd ever seen, And about 2 weeks later, I got a call. I was watching a NASCAR race on a Sunday afternoon, and answered the phone, and it was Vince, and he said, Sarge, and I said, yes. He said, Vince, and there's only one Vince, and he said, see that you're done with G.I. Joe, and I said, yeah. It's funny you should know that, and he said, well, I've got an idea for you. I don't know if you'd come over to my house, and I'll go through it with you. So, of course, I thought he was going to take G.I. Joe, the real American hero, Sergeant Slaughter, and make him the real American hero with all of his, ways of doing it. And but he had other ideas. So when I went to his home, he laid out this huge piece of cardboard that was all painted up, and it had LA Coliseum, and would hold 104,000 fans. And he said, I want to fill this up at WrestleMania 7, and I want you to help me do it. And I said, okay, great. He said, well, listen to me and see what you think. So he started laying on this, idea, coming back as a Rocky sympathizer, and eventually working our way to Hogan and I to be, the main event. So I, of course, being the opposite of what you are is always fun to play as a character, and I was all gung ho. I wanted to do it immediately, but he said, go home and talk to your family about it. It could be pretty rough out there, So I went and talked to my wife and my daughters, who really didn't know much about it. And, my wife just said, you're crazy to do something like that. It's impossible, for G.I. Joe, Sergeant Slaughter to do that. So I said, well, let's give it a try. So we started on our way, and of course it did get pretty rough out there. The death threats and the bomb threats. And when I first started out, they brought me back nice and slow and let people digest it, knowing that just came off of G.I. Joe, and he's anti-American, and he's going for Iraq, and what was going on. You had to take your time doing it, and didn't want to lose him. And so we worked hard at it, and Randy's Macho Man Savage and the Ultimate Warrior were in a kind of a battle, a rivalry, and Macho Man broke his hand. And Vince came to me and said, we're going to switch gears. I'm going to put you with the Warrior and have Sherry be your manager and get through till Randy heals. So okay. So Hogan kind of disappeared, and we went on with the Warrior and did all these matches. And at that time, Randy and Warrior were into almost into the cage match part of their storyline. So I had to get into shape pretty quick with the Warrior. But we battled and we battled and we battled, and finally in Miami took the title from him and started on our way to Hogan and the LA Coliseum and the 104,000 fans, and it just that night after I took the title from Warrior, it really, the gas was really poured on the fire, and there was no looking back at that point, and it really started, getting rough out there. I had gotten to Philadelphia, and one of the road agents asked me if I spoke to Vince or my wife, and I said, no, is there a problem? So why don't you call him? So I called home, and there was no answer, and then I called Vince, and he told me that someone had called up and threatened to kill me and my family and him and his family and blow up our homes and blow up the wrestling office and blow up the studio and do all kinds of dastardly deeds. So he took it upon himself to call my wife and get her out of the house until he could secure premises and everything. And so I finally got a hold of my wife, and she was kind of like laughing about it and told me, I told you this wasn't a good idea. And of course, I lived in Connecticut, and I lived on a 4-acre piece of land that was very, very difficult to find, much less get to. And Vincent promised me that there'd be security there by that night. And so when I got back a few days later, I went up to my driveway, and there was a Winnebago. How it got up there, I have no idea. A Winnebago in my driveway, and there were 4 gentlemen with suits, and came by and introduced themselves and showed me that they were armed and they were packing, and they would watch the perimeter of my property 24/7. They were going to take my children to school and take my wife to the shopping center and all types of things. And of course, my wife wasn't too happy about that, so she didn't allow any of the things to go on at school, or we just kind of bit the bullet, more or less. And we got through it, and just it was one of those things where you can't look back and say, I should have did this, should have did that. Vince told me to do whatever because of my creative nature and ability to just go and do whatever I could do. And if I got too far over the line, he would pull the reins back. And that's kind of what we did a few times. There were times, there was Saddam Hussein's birthday. We took a cake out to the ring and asked everybody to sing happy birthday to Saddam. To have people stand up in the audience and give 10 seconds of silence to all the brave Iraqi soldiers who died in the overtake at Kuwait, and all types of crazy things. They wanted me to burn the American flag, but I refused to do that. So I suggested that we take Hulk Hogan's shirt, put it on a flagpole, or more or less a stick, and say that represents Americana, and burn it. And I think that got more repercussions than, well, I don't think it got more, but it was as hardcore as you could go, other than doing the way. And so we just look back at it and thinking of Gene Okerlund refused to interview me a few times because he was afraid, because we were doing live shows. And Brother Love would interview me. People look back and watch all the interviews that I did with Brother Love. But I could talk to you for weeks about what we did, but and how we handled it. And General Adnan, of course, was from Iraq. Grew up there, went to college with Saddam Hussein, and knew how to speak the language. And his family was all killed over there, and it was a rough time for everybody.
Definitely. Now, as we start to wind it down a little bit here, I'm always very curious about this, especially a guy of your stature and your caliber. You're one of the greatest of all time. If anybody says pro wrestling, boom, Sergeant Slaughter's name should be at the top of the list. Anybody says G.I. Joe, boom, your name immediately comes to mind. Obviously, you're the great American hero, if you will, but do you have a favorite match or matches that you had in your career? Because I know you had a ton of great ones. Does any stick out to you?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, the alley fight with Pat Patterson, because of the nature of it being that, there's no referee, and it was the first of its kind, and wrestlers like Mick Foley were in the audience as fans back then, and the impact it had on today's, entertainment value. The tag match with Steamboat and Youngblood was Gernodle and one of my all-time favorites, because it was the first of its kind. And, the Iron Sheik, I guess, probably stands out to be out there with one of my favorite matches, a boot camp match in Madison Square Garden. I'd say it was one of the greatest matches of all time, along with with the alley fight with Pat Patterson, and I think the impact that the boot camp match had was later on, years later, when the 7 presidents that I'd met, 2 of them saw that match, and when I won the match, I took the American flag and I stood up and I said the Pledge of Allegiance, and they said that they stood up and said it with me. So you knew you didn't know how far your audience went until you knew a president was standing up doing the Pledge of Allegiance with you, and that it was a fan. So just really the impact of that match, and what audience it drew, and how the entertainment of today of the WWE has grown, and you don't know who's watching out there, and if we do presidents back then, can you imagine who's watching it today?
Very, very true. Now, you've wrestled so many great guys. Obviously, we're talking about Steamboat and Youngblood, and you've even wrestled, of course, Nature Boy Ric Flair, and we were talking about your feud with Hulk Hogan, and obviously we mentioned you winning the title from the Ultimate Warrior. But is there any guy throughout your career that you would say, man, that's my favorite opponent, just something clicked with you guys, maybe the chemistry was there?
Well, whenever you wrestled Ricky Steamboat, it was the chemistry was always there. It was like we knew each other, without even looking at each other. We could control the match and control the audience and control the pace, and it was just an amazing talent to work with, along with Pat Patterson. When you get 2 ring generals together in a match, it's amazing what results can come about. It's not so much like today where you see who can do the biggest suplex and who's the strongest, or who's the biggest going over the top rope, and it's how you present it and how you weave it through a match, and that it has some meaning to it. And but those are the kind of guys like Pat Patterson and Ricky Steamboat that you could tell stories with, and the Iron Sheik and the Warrior Hogan were great names. They're great performers. Sometimes you couldn't keep up with them. It all depended on who was in the ring with them. And Bob Backlund, who was a great performer, but no one ever liked his style because it's kind of a back to the 60s type of style. But if you get the right villain in there with him, people cheered Bob Backlund. Most of the time when you would watch a Bob Backlund match, he was booed. But when I was in the ring with Bob Backlund, people cheered him, and that was a big feather in your cap to do something like that. And when someone like Vince McMahon Sr. comes to you and says, Sergeant, he never called me Sarge or anything, but Sergeant, he called me Sergeant. If I looked up Ring General in the dictionary, your picture would be there. Now that's a compliment you don't get from just anybody or any time. And I've always been very honored that I heard that from him. It's other than talking about crowds, the big thing that always goes down in your resume is S.O., sold out. When you sell out something like a Madison Square Garden and you sell out the arena next to it, when you sell out the Detroit Silverdome and you sell out all these arenas, which they'll probably do in Dallas, it's not so much 1 or 2 people that do it anymore. It's the WWE that does it. They can make an announcement and it sells out. But when a entertainer goes in and sells it out, and it sold out next to your name, that's a pretty big deal. That's the only thing that really was a hiccup on the way to WrestleMania 7 and completing that journey, was not being able to say that I sold out 104,000 seat Coliseum. That was the real hardship. The match was there. The people were there. We had the pay-per-view audience record for a while. Been broken many times since, but that word sold out next to your name at a place like the LA Coliseum or Detroit or Dallas, that's what really simplifies, you're being one of the greater or the best performers of your time.
Totally agree. And Sarge, we always have to say, you might have sold those buildings out, but we also bought in. But before we let you go, we just want to know, you were one of the first crossover superstars to, really accomplish a lot in both two platforms. What would you say your overall legacy is, whether it's in wrestling or in pop culture or G.I. Joe? What would you say the Sergeant Slaughter legacy is?
Well, I just wanted to be remembered as someone that entertained people and enjoyed watching me, paying money to come see whether I was the American hero or the villain. And there's legends and there's legendary, two different words. Immortal, different words mean different things. It's on how you come back from injuries, how you climb back up the mountain when you get knocked off. And it's the name Sergeant Slaughter. Usually, you think of one person, and that's what you want. You don't want anybody to kind of copy that image, or if they do, not to be able to do it. And so, just continuing on. I don't move like I did at one time, but so if somebody wants to put the tights on and the boots on, and I don't ever back down from it.